We're continuing our walk through the book of Psalms, looking at the lyrics of each psalm, looking at what we can find when we study the Psalms as songs, particularly in their cultural background. So if you've missed any of the previous episodes in this series, they're all here in the playlist. So it's helpful if you start and just work your way through the Psalms as we go along with them, starting in Psalm 1. And this is actually a callback to Psalm 1. We're in Psalm 25 today, and we're going to see how it relates to Psalm 1 as we jump into it. So before we do that, as always, if you haven't subscribed, we would really appreciate it. And with that out of the way, let's look at Psalm 25. So as always, I'm going to read this through in my old 1984 NIV translation. So here we go. Psalm 25 of David. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. In you I trust, O my God. Do not let me be put to shame, nor let my enemies triumph over me. No one whose hope is in you will ever be put to shame, but they will be put to shame who are treacherous without excuse. Show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth and teach me, for you are God, my Savior. And my hope is in you all day long. Remember, O Lord, your great mercy and love, for they are from old. Remember not the sins of my youth and my rebellious ways. According to your love, remember me. For you are good, O Lord. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore he instructs sinners in his ways. He guides the humble in what is right and teaches them by his way. All the ways of the Lord are loving and faithful for those who keep the demands of his covenant. For the sake of your name, O Lord, forgive my iniquity, though it is great. Who then is the man that fears the Lord? He will instruct him in the way chosen for him. He will spend his days in prosperity, and his descendants will inherit the land. The Lord confides in those who fear him. He makes his covenant known to them. My eyes are ever on the Lord, for only he will release my feet from the snare. Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. The troubles of my heart have multiplied. Free me from my anguish. Look upon my affliction and my distress and take away all my sins. See how my enemies have increased and how fiercely they hate me. Guard my life and rescue me. Let me not be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. May integrity and uprightness protect me, because my hope is in you. Redeem Israel, O God, from all their troubles. I don't know if you guys played it, but my sister and I used to play in the car back before there were such things as cell phones and iPads. Long trips, we would play I'm going to the grocery store. And you play I'm going to the grocery store by one person says, I'm going to the grocery store and I'm going to buy apples. And the next person says, I'm going to the grocery store and I'm going to buy apples and bananas. And then the next person goes back, I'm going to the grocery store, I'm going to buy apples, bananas, and carrots. Each time you have to add something that starts with the next letter of the alphabet. And the whole point of the game is to see if you can get all the way through the alphabet. I don't think we ever did. But that is an acrostic. And that's what acrostics are. And so this psalm is an acrostic. The lines begin with the letters of the Hebrew alphabet almost completely sequentially. Now I say almost, you'll see why. After the title here, and this one, the title is very short. It's just LeDavid. For David, to David, of David, Davidic. And then it begins. And I've put in my translation here on the screen, each of the letters in red. Just makes it easy to see the acrostic. But it starts in line 1, there's the Aleph. And then in line 2, now this is why I say it's partial acrostic, because line 2, the NIV read, in you I trust, oh my God. And they actually moved this, Elohai, to the end of the line, but there's no text that has that I know of. It's always at the beginning. The bait comes after that. And so what you have at the beginning of this acrostic, I think, you've got a bunch of alephs. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is this letter, aleph. And in the first line, there's 2 of them. And in the second line, there's 1 of them. And the second part of the second line, there's 4 more. I didn't put these in red, but there's tons of alephs just clustered right at the beginning of the psalm. And then right after that, you have 2 baits, baka batachti. So the beginning of the psalm, it's not, at least in the manuscripts we have, it's not clear cut, but it is, Alecha Adonai, nafshi esa, to you, Yahweh, my life or my soul, nafshi, this is nefesh, we translate soul, life, breath, it's literally throat. To you, Yahweh, my soul I lift. And we saw in the last Psalm, Psalm 24, lift was a key verb. And so that might be one of the things that links this Psalm next in the Psalter. So different ways of translating nafshi esa, I lift up my soul. But this is kind of clarified a little bit in the next line. What that means, Elohai, my God, you see the two B's right there, Baka betachti. In you I trust. And so therefore, do not let me be ashamed. Let my enemy not rejoice over me. So God, because I trust in you, because you're my God, because I lift up my soul, let me not be put to shame. And shamed, we've kind of lost the idea of what shame actually is in modern culture because we don't live, for the most part, in an honor-shame society. There are elements of honor shame in our culture, but not near to the degree that many ancient Near East cultures had. And so to be shamed was not just, it's not to be ashamed. Like we think of ashamed as I feel bad for something I've done. Shamed was a communal thing. Being shamed was being scorned. Think of like concepts like with the Amish being shunned. Like when somebody's shunned, they're literally excluded from the community and people turn their backs on them and expressing like, you no longer exist to us. Shame had that kind of connotation. So asking God, don't let me be shamed is more than just saying, God, don't let me feel ashamed of something I did. Like it's a whole different level. And that's what this verb, bosh, to be put to shame, that's what he's asking God to not let happen. But instead, and this is where the next line of the acrostic comes, Gam kal koveka lo yevoshu. Gam this usually doesn't get translated in a lot of English translations, but this is the G. This is the next letter in the Hebrew acrostic, Gam, and it means surely or certainly or also. It's an emphatic way of stating what this is saying, which is that everyone hoping in you not will be shamed. Like they will not be shamed. Yevoshu, the ones who will be shamed, habogdim rekam, the ones betraying rekam in vain or in emptiness or futility. So the idea is someone like betraying, and they're seeking to betray and act treacherously to get some kind of advantage, to take advantage of. But ultimately, it's in vain. It's in vain because they will be shamed. So the ones who hope in God don't have to worry about being put to shame. It's the betrayers, the treacherous. Those are the ones that the psalmist is saying they will be shamed. Then the next line, Dalet, Dirachecha Adonai, Hodieni, your way. This is the word for road or way or path, derech. Your way, Yahweh, make me know, cause me to know. This is from the verb yada, which means to know, but it's in what's called the hifil stem, which means it's a causative. So he's asking God, like show me, make it known to me your way. And this psalm harkens back to Psalm 1. Psalm 1, the very first psalm we looked at, it compared and contrasted the way of the righteous who walk in God's Torah, his law, and then the way of the wicked. And you go one way, you'll be this. You go another way, you'll be this. Orchothecha lamdeni. Your paths, teach me. So make me know your way, teach me your paths. This verb lamad, to teach. This is where Talmudim comes from, the word Talmudim, the disciples, ones who are taught. It's a form of this verb lamad. The psalmist is basically saying, I want to keep being a student. It's not just, oh, I've read your ways, I know your law, I'm good to go. It's not one and done. It's constant. Keep me on the path by showing me your ways. Then we come to the Hey, the next letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Hadricheni, literally make me walk. This is now that hifil form of the verb darach, which is where this noun derek comes from. So cause me to walk, or we would say lead me, but emithecha, in your truth. And then this next line, this is controversial a little bit. I asked a Psalm scholar friend and he disagreed, but then I looked at some other scholars and they did agree. Some people say that the Vav, the next letter in the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav or Wow, depending on how you pronounce it, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yod. So the Vav is missing because the Lamadeni, they group with this line here. So they say, cause me to walk in your truth and teach me is one line. And then there is no Vav. So it's a partial acrostic. And then it picks back up down in verse 6 with Zion. But I'm not convinced by that. I do think the Vav is right here in Vilamadeni. You can see it. And yet it does make this line really short. And then you've got two longer lines after it. But I think that these two longer lines, and this is a little poet nerdiness, so don't worry about this if you don't know Hebrew, don't worry about any of this. But I'm just making the case for why I've translated it this way. I think that these two phrases balance out these two. I think that the hey and the vav are intentionally right there beside each other. Now, I could be wrong, but I think you can make a plausible case for it. And I think it reads well, cause me to walk in your truth and teach me. So two things that the psalmist is asking, and they're both start with hey and vav. And then the two clauses that balance it out, the why, ki ata Elohei yishi, for you, the God of my salvation. Otcha chiviti kal hayom. You, I hope for every day or all day. Kal can mean every or it can mean all. Both of these would work. He's either saying, for I hope in you, and this is that verb from back up at the beginning of the psalm, and it either says every day, kal hayam, like all the days, or all day, all of the day, like all day long, I hope for you. But as far as I know, either is possible. And especially in poetry, you don't want to press poetry for literal grammar. That's what I've learned in translating the Psalms. So now we come to the Zion. Zakor rachamecha. Remember your compassion. And this is racham. This is the word for like womb. It has to do with that feeling in the womb. This is a motherly word, like the compassion that a mother feels. And so that's what the psalmist is asking God to remember. It's actually telling God. This is an imperative, but imperatives in context are requests, especially when you're crying out in prayer. Remember your compassion, Yahweh. And not just your compassion, but v'hazadecha, your chesed. Remember your compassion and your chesed. God is a God of racham and chesed. Translations vary with how they handle chesed. We've talked about that before. Loving kindness, mercy, steadfast love, faithfulness, something like that. I just always leave it as chesed. And why? Is he having to tell God to remember that? Ki ma'olam hema, for from long ago, or from olam. Olam means it sometimes it means it's translated as forever or everlasting or to the ages or to eternity, but it goes in both directions. It doesn't just mean in the future, like a long, 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 long way off in the future, but it also means a long way off in the past. Olam, the root word, Walt Kaiser once said it when we were in class, like 20 something years ago. He was talking about olam and how it sometimes gets translated as forever. And he said the key meaning, it comes from a verb that means to hide or to be hidden. And the idea is it's so far away, either in the past or in the future, that it's hidden from sight. Like that's how far off it is. So in this case, me'olam is talking about back in the past. So from olam are they, hema. What are they? The rechem and the chesed. So he's asking God, remember these things, your qualities. For my sake, remember your qualities. And then the next line in the acrostic, the chet, chatoth na'urai, the sins of my na'urai. This is my na'ar, when I was a youth, a young person. The sins of my youth and my pesha, my transgressions. The things I did as a dumb kid, basically. Al tizkur, do not remember. So he's asking God, remember, think back to your compassion, your chesed. Like, remember those things, not the sins of my youth. The psalmist, he's admitting that he has screwed up along the way. He has veered off the path, especially when he was a na'ar, a young man. Kahasadecha, according to your chesed, there's the word again, Zakur li ata, remember me, you. That's awkward in English, but that's what he's saying. Remember me, you. Like you remember me, according to your chesed. Lama'an tuvcha Adonai, for the sake of your goodness, your tov, Adonai, Yahweh. And speaking of tov, we come to the next line in the acrostic, verse 8. Tov v'yashar Adonai, good and upright is Yahweh. Alkein yoreh chatim badarech. Because of this, or thus, because God is good and upright, yoreh, teaching sinners, chatim, those who sin, in the way. And this is that word, derech again, way or road. So God is teaching sinners. This verb, yoreh, to teach, this is where Torah comes from. A lot of people think it means law. It doesn't. Torah does not mean law. Torah means, and it comes from this verb, yara. Torah is instruction. It's literally to point. I believe at the literal level, yara is to point, like to point out or to point to, but it means teaching. So that is what God's doing. Because he is good and upright, he has given Torah in order to yoreh, to be teaching. And that was wildly different than most other gods in the ancient world. You had to figure out their will. Go to a diviner, cut open an animal, examine his entrails, look to omens and nature. You had to do all these things, know the right name of the god in order to get them to act, bring the right sacrifices. Not the God of Israel. He has shown people what to do, which again, in the ancient world, that was a huge, tremendous blessing and very different from the gods of surrounding countries. We come to the Yod in verse 9 of the Acrostic. He will lead, or may he lead, if this is adjussive, he will lead, may he lead the poor or the afflicted. An avim can mean poor, it can mean destitute. It's usually a term for people who are on the outs, the have-nots rather than the haves. May he lead the poor in mishpat, in justice. Both in the ancient world and today, that's the one thing that the poor often don't have access to, justice. There's a talk you can find. I'll try to find it and see if I can link it. Gary Haugen gave it. He's the founder of International Justice Mission. So they work to free victims of like sex trafficking or, slave labor, things like that in developing countries where they do not have access. And he said the number one affliction of poverty around the world is lack of access to justice. No one enforcing the laws that should, in theory, keep people out of situations where they're being trafficked, where they're being enslaved, because they don't have justice. And that's how it was in the ancient world. You can't pay someone bigger and stronger to stop someone bigger and stronger than you from taking your stuff. Can't afford to bribe the official. That's why God said so many times how much he detests lying witnesses or judges who take bribes. So in that vein, the psalmist is praying, may God lead the poor in justice, vilamed anavim, and may he teach, there's the verb to teach, may he teach the poor darcho, his way. There's the word derech again, way or road. You've seen these terms repeated throughout this psalm. It's not accidental. And why is that a good thing that he should pray for? Because here's the kaf of the acrostic, line 10, kal archoth Adonai, chesed va'emeth. All the paths of Yahweh, chesed and emeth. However you want to translate chesed and emeth is the word for truth. L'notzarei baritho, to preserve or to guard or to protect, baritho, his covenant. This is the first time barith, the word for covenant, has appeared in the Psalms. We've gone 25 Psalms until we've seen the word barith. This word is incredibly important. I mean, this in Latin, this would be testamentum. This is where Old Testament, New Testament comes from. So covenant is one of the most important terms in all of the Bible. This is the first appearance of it in the Psalms. And that's what God preserving his covenant, va'edothao, and his decrees, his statutes, his ordinances. That's what the path of God is. That's what his chesed and emeth. It's for the purpose of preserving his covenant. And then we come to the Lamed, verse 11, Lama'an Shimcha Adonai, for the sake of your name, Yahweh, V'salakta la'avoni, and you will release, or may you release my iniquity, my avon. This is not talking about the pasha, the transgressions that he did as a na'ar, as a youth. But now this is the word avon. So we've seen all three words, the three main Hebrew words for sin. We've seen them so far in this psalm. Chata, which is just kind of the generic word for sin. Pesha, which is the word for transgression. You think of like if there's a boundary, pesha is like going around the boundary, and then avon. Avon is usually translated iniquity, and avon is like you're not going around the boundary, you're running straight through it. You are committing iniquity. So like there are varying degrees of sin in terms of the vocabulary. So chata is sin. It can be inadvertent. It can be intentional. It's the word for sin. Pasha, you're transgressing a known boundary. Avon, you're just committing iniquity. And that's what he says, release salah. To release, this literally means to release, but the way it's used, it means forgive. So a lot of translations will just say forgive my iniquity or forgive however they translate avon. But there are different ways to say forgive in Hebrew, and sometimes it's lift, sometimes it's cover, like kafar, and then sometimes it's salach, release. Kiravhu, for it is great. This is confession right here. He is not asking, this is not like a psalm where he's saying, God, give me what I deserve. This psalm, he is specifically saying, God, give me what I don't deserve. And this verse 11 is the center of the psalm. So right in the midst of all of the things the psalmist is asking about, guidance and teaching and learning, the center of it is forgive me. I don't deserve it. My iniquity is great. Release it. Cry of forgiveness in the middle of this psalm about guidance and instruction. And that's one of the things that Torah was to do, was to instruct the people to seek forgiveness when they did veer off the path. And there was a whole elaborate sacrificial system set up to help ingrain in them the concept of being holy, of being set apart, of being different, of atonement. There was a day once a year when your avon, your iniquity, could be atoned for through the whole elaborate ceremony with the two goats, bearing the iniquity, taking it out of the camp into the wilderness, the blood of the other being poured out on the altar. Like it's a whole thing. We've spent years teaching through it here on the channel. So see our playlist where we walk through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. But that's the core of this psalm. That's the center of the acrostic, this cry of forgive my iniquity. And then it picks back up. Here's the mem. Mizeh ha'ish yareh Adonai. Who is this, the man who fears Yahweh? Like colloquially, we might say, where is somebody who fears God? Because Yorenu baderech yibchar. He will teach him in the way he will choose. And we would translate this as the way he should choose. He'll teach him what he should choose to do, how he should choose to walk. The one who fears Yahweh, the one who is in covenant relationship. Nafsho batov talin. His soul, his life, nefesh, in goodness, talin, she will literally lodge. She will spend the night. Lean is the verb for to spend the night somewhere at an inn, a resting place. So that's where the soul of the one who fears Yahweh, who is being taught to go in his way, that's where his soul will, along the way, will lodge in goodness. V'zaro yirash aretz. And his seed, his zara, his offspring, we would say his descendants, but it's the word seed, and that is incredibly important throughout Scripture. His seed will inherit the land. Now, this is a monumentally important concept that we've talked about in the video series here that came out a couple of weeks ago now, the 4-part series, Why I'm Not a Christian Zionist. And one of the points was when it comes to promises of inheriting the land, those promises are always to the seed. And in the New Testament, that seed gets identified pretty clearly. So see that video series if you're wondering why I capitalized seed here in this line, but that's why. So continuing the acrostic, mem nun samek, sod Adonai, lireau, the counsel, the sod. Sod is a word, it means like counsel, like advice people give you, or secret. Like if you're going to plan something, you gather, your whoever's in on what the plan is, you gather them together. That's the sod. That's the counsel. But that's what it means. And some translations will even have the secret counsel because they want to bring out that aspect of it. But the counsel of Adonai, the counsel of Yahweh, is to the ones fearing him, or for the ones. Le can be translated to or for. That's who enjoys his counsel. Uvritho, and his covenant, l'hodiyam, to the ones making him known. And there's that verb again, yada, to know, and this is in the hiphil, so to cause to know, to make known, you might say to proclaim. So the ones who are fearing Yahweh and making him known, that's who are included in his sod, his counsel. Now we come to the ayin. This is one of those letters in Hebrew. There's two letters that are virtually unpronounceable in English, aleph, the first letter, and ayin. Aleph is just stopping the airflow. So if you would say, like, think of the word button in English, B-U-T-T-O-N, button. In American English, we just say button, like button. We don't have the T's. It's just we stop the sound, button, button. So that's kind of what Aleph does. Aleph just stops the sound. But ayin is a little bit further in the throat, and it's almost a G. It's very close to a G, lion. And one of the ways we know is because this is the first letter in the word Gaza, like the place. Gaza in the Middle East is Gaza. So ayin is one of those, some people don't pronounce it. I don't even know if in modern Hebrew outside of, the Levant, I don't know if they pronounce the ayin. If you're Ashkenazi and you're out there and listening, let me know. Do you pronounce the ayin or do you just leave it silent like Aleph? I try to pronounce it just because it helps me keep vocabulary a little clearer in my head. But anyway, Leinai, my eyes, tamid, always or continually, El Adonai, to Yahweh. My eyes always on the Lord. Kihu yotzi, for he brings me out, meresheth raglai, from a net, my feet. For he brings out, not brings me out, I said brings me out earlier, but it's for he brings out from the net or from the snare, raglai, my feet. So the image is, I love this imagery. It's my eyes are to the Lord because my feet are in the net. My feet are ensnared. It's like an animal that's been caught in a snare and has worn out and it can't even kick or squirm or writhe. All it can do is lay there and look. That's the image of the psalmist here. His eyes are to the Lord because the Lord is the one who frees his feet from the snare, from the net. And so keeping that same mood, we come to the pei line, Panei elai v'chaneni, turn to me, literally face me. Pana is related to the word for face. So turn to me means to face me. And it actually is one of the few times in English the figure of speech works, both in Hebrew and in English, because we would say face me. It's just kind of a cool little coincidence. But face me or turn to me and chaneni, show grace to me, be gracious to me, show me favor. Why? Because my feet are in a net? Well, metaphorically, but we find out what that net actually is. Ki yachid, for I am lonely, or I am alone. V'ani ani, a little wordplay here. They almost sound exactly the same, except for the difference between this ayin and this aleph. V'ani ani. So we'd smooth it out in English for I am lonely and afflicted. But it's just more visceral if you say it literally. For alone and afflicted me, or I. Here's the tzare, tzaroth levavi hirchivu. So tzaroth, the troubles, levav, my heart, the troubles of my heart. And then this verb rachav, this is where the name Rahab comes from. Rachav means to spread wide, which there's been some articles on why Rahab the prostitute and her name means to spread wide, because that has the same connotation in English as it does in Hebrew. And there's another coincidence because it also means broad place, like wide open place, broad place. And so metaphorically, a prostitute is someone who is wide open if you've got the money, so to speak. But also in English, the word broad is, old euphemism for woman. The wordplay works in Hebrew and English again. But what in English, like what would this mean? The troubles of my heart, they make wide. What's the connotation there? It's not a sexual connotation at all, obviously. But it doesn't seem like a good connotation, to make broad, to spread wide, sometimes has a good sense, like to spread out, to relax, to be on level ground in a broad, open place, as opposed to being hemmed in or cramped in by our troubles. Well, however we translate this, the troubles of my heart, they made wide, or they make wide. The next line in parallel usually unpacks it a little bit. So, mimsukotai hotzieni, from my distresses, bring me out or deliver me. So the sense is probably something like the troubles of my heart have enlarged, have just spread out. And it's not in a good sense if it's talking about troubles of your heart spreading out. I think the closest in English we'd say increase. The troubles of my heart increase, so from my distresses, bring me out. But now we come to what we should have next in verse 18 is the kof. The letter in the English would be Q, kof. And there's no kof. You can see right here, it's actually resh, R, and resh is in the second line as well. So some Psalm scholars have suggested that this verb, ra'e ani, see my affliction, va'amali, and my toil or my hardship, my struggle. So look upon, see. Some have suggested that this word was actually miscopied by a scribe somewhere way back because it appears in the very next line. So it was like their eye jumped. It's actually called parablepsis, where your eye jumps from one line to another. We've all done it when we're reading things and we accidentally skip a line. So some have suggested that. The problem is there's no textual evidence for that. If this was originally a Hebrew verb that starts with kof, it would have been nice. It would have completed the acrostic, but we don't have any manuscripts that have that. And again, there is another psalm that also, I believe, is missing the kof. So this could very well be a pattern. This could be a type of acrostic where you double up these letters at the beginning. So you got some double alepphs and double baits. Then you go through the acrostic. Everything's normal. And then when you get to the end, the last letters, resh, sin, shin, and tau, there's a doubling up of resh and sin and shin as well. And possibly this kof down here at the end, as the last word of the psalm ends in kof. So maybe that's the missing kof. And maybe this is an actual type of acrostic. I don't know. Not a lot of evidence for that other than we do see that pattern elsewhere, something like it. So this might be how it was originally written. But anyway, it's look upon or see, look at, notice my affliction and my toil. Vasa lakal chatothai. And here's another word for forgive. This time it's not salach, to release. It's nasa, lift. Lift all my sins. So this bookends with what we saw near the beginning of the psalm. Aleka Adonai nafshi esa, I lift my soul to you. Now, at the end of the psalm, near the end, it's saying, look at my affliction, see my toil, and lift my sins. Then we come to the proper resh in the acrostic, and it's the same word again, re'eh. See, oyavai, my enemies. Like, look at so notice my affliction and my toil. That's the first thing he's telling God to notice. And now he's saying, and notice my enemy, kiravu, for they are great. And then here comes the sin and the shin, v'senath hamas sheneuni, and hatred of violence. And it's not hating violence, it's hatred consisting of violence. So violent hatred. They hate me. So look at my enemy. These aren't just people that are like, oh, I don't like the way he dresses. Oh, I don't like that he cut me off in traffic. Oh, I don't like what. This is like, I hate this person and I'm going to try to kill this person. That's the type of enemies that the psalmist is telling God to take note of. This is not your everyday suburban, North American people that just don't like me. Like, this is beyond that. Think of people actively plotting against your life. So there's resh, sin, and then shin. Shamra, nafshi, guard my soul or my life, my nefesh, v'hatzileni, and deliver me. Like, God, you are my protection. You're who I'm crying out to because I got no one else. But if God does that, al evosh, I will not be shamed. Ki hasithi vach, for I take refuge in you. These are themes we've seen throughout the psalm so far. And this one at the beginning of the psalm, he cried out, do not let me be shamed. And now at the end of the psalm, God, who is the one guarding his life and delivering him, he will not be shamed. So it's moved into a confidence throughout the prayer. And not only will he not be shamed, but the final, the tau, the last letter in the acrostic, tom vayasher yitzruni. Tom is integrity or wholeness, completeness, and yasher is uprightness. So integrity and uprightness, they will keep me. Like they will protect me. And it's this verb that we saw up in verse 10, to preserve his covenant. It's the word for preserve, protect. That's what integrity and uprightness are going to do for the psalmist. Why? Again, calling back to the beginning of the psalm, ki kivithicha, for I hope in you. Remember, surely all who hope in you will not be shamed. Now he states that confidently at the end of the psalm. I will not be shamed. I take refuge in you. Integrity and uprightness preserve or keep me, for I hope in you. And then at the end of the psalm, there's a line. This is outside of the acrostic. Padei Elohim et Israel mikol tsarothao. Redeem, O God, Israel from all his troubles. And this is the word that was the troubles of my heart we saw earlier. So that's the acrostic. That's the ABCs of trusting God, Psalm 25. A couple of things that I think are interesting to point out before we wrap up this episode. If you look at 3 points in the psalm, the first line, Aleph, the middle line, verse 11, Lamed, and then the last line after the whole thing, Peh. And at least one interpreter has noted Aleph Lamed Peh is the verb that means to teach. It's one of the ways to say teach. And so they see, and again, this might seem weird to us because you're like, okay, well, that seems kind of random. And it might be. But there's all kinds of, like, interpreters have scoured the Psalms and the Hebrew Bible looking for these kind of connections. And because this line at the end seems like it's out of place, it comes after the acrostic, you would expect the last line of the psalm to end in a tau. But then there's this line that they've kind of stuck on the end that starts with pay. What could be the purpose of that? So that's part of the reasoning. So it may be intentional and it may be trying to communicate something. And that's one of the things that some interpreters have suggested, that throughout the psalm, Aleph Lamed Peh, this whole psalm is about teaching. And asking God, teach me your way. And so I don't know how much stock I put in that, but it's interesting to think about. Another point I think is well worth pointing out is this verse 7. And you can see I've just separated each clause out because it's divided differently by different interpreters. Sins of my youth and my transgressions do not remember. And it could be like period. According to your hesed, remember me, you, period. And then another reason, for the sake of your goodness, Yahweh. So you could break it up that way. Or you could say, sins of my youth and my transgressions do not remember according to your hesed. Like according to your covenant faithfulness, don't remember the sins of my youth. Instead, so the period would come here, instead, you remember me for the sake of your goodness, Yahweh. You could break it up that way as well. I think either works. It doesn't make a huge difference. The psalmist is asking in verses 6 and 7, basically, remember the sinner, not the sin. You know, some people kind of dog on the phrase, love the sinner, hate the sin, because like you can't separate the sinner from the sin. Well, the psalmist clearly hopes you can separate the sinner from the sin, because that's what he's asking God to do. He's asking God, don't remember the sins of my youth and the transgressions of my youth. Don't remember that. Remember me, Zakar li. So here is at least one verse that does differentiate the sinner from the sin. And then lastly, I think that this is an analogy. I'm not the one to come up with it. A couple of commentators have pointed it out. But if Psalm 1 was like one of these road signs, right? Like road signs say, hey, you go this way, you're going to experience this. If you go this way, you're going to experience this. And that's what Psalm 1 was, the two ways that you can go. So if Psalm 1 was like a road sign, it doesn't tell you how to go. It just tells you where to go. I mean, this is helpful, but you really need a GPS. Or back in the pre-digital age that I grew up in, you need a roadmap, an atlas, because the signs can point you in the right direction. But for navigating the actual terrain, you need something that's giving you more. And so that's what Psalm 25 is. Whereas Psalm 1 was like a road sign, Psalm 25 is like your GPS. And Bullock has pointed this out in his Psalms commentary. These are the verbs that are used throughout the psalm, like the repeated verbs, show or make known, the hifil of yada. We saw it in verse 4. We saw it in verse 14. Teach, Lamad, we saw that in 25:4 and in 25. And this is a typo in Logos. So if anybody from Logos is watching this, there's an error of this software. This should say 25:14. We see different forms of the verb guide, the hifil of darach, to lead or to guide someone in the path. See that in verse 4 and verse 9. The verb instruct, yara, which is where Torah comes from. See that in verse 8 and verse 12. And then zakar, to remember. We see that in that section we just looked at, 6 and 7, where he's asking God, don't remember my sins, remember me. So all of these verbs have to do with teaching, learning, guiding. This is what it means to walk in the way of the Lord. And I love what Bullock brings out in his commentary. He's talking about in America how education works, and it's like just tons of value put on education from like kindergarten to 12th grade. Like you have to go to school, and no one can be denied education from kindergarten to 12th grade. But then Bullock says, however, once a student has satisfied the requirements of a 12th grade education, the government tends to stop emphasizing the importance of education. Yeah, you can go to college, maybe grad school, but you're done for all intents and purposes from the government's perspective. And so he says, sadly, many Christians carry this notion into their Christian experience. Instead of realizing their need for spiritual continuing education until the day they die, many Christians wrongly believe that all they need to know can be gained through a half-hour sermon once a week. Psalm 25 shows David's realization of his need to continue to learn and grow as he repeatedly asks the Lord to teach him. So all throughout Psalm 25, you have the priority is on teaching, learning, being guided, making known. This is what the psalmist is crying out for. And that's what it means to Baka Batachti, in you I trust. That's what it entails. Trust entails, like when you're going in unfamiliar territory, you trust that whoever's leading you is going to lead you in the right place. Or think about people who are vision impaired. Like I have a good friend, a fellow jiu-jitsu black belt, and he's completely blind. We've had him here on the channel. Carlos, shout out. He has a guide dog, and his dog, he relies upon to literally lead him in the path, the way he should go. So there's an element of trust that he places in his guide dog. And of course, the dog has been beautifully trained and is, that's what seeing eye dogs do. Their whole lives are dedicated to being faithful guides because a life depends on it. The one holding that harness on their back is literally depending on that dog in a lot of situations for safety and guidance and protection. Well, that's what the psalmist is crying out to God to be. The psalmist that's what it means to trust in God in the face of enemies, in the face of troubles of the heart, in the face of communal shame, in the face of affliction and toil. All of these things, the proper response, according to Psalm 25, is to trust in God in the sense of being taught, being led, being instructed, being shown the way through God's word and his covenant. So Psalm 25, it's the ABCs of trust, basically. And the emphasis is this is what it looks like to be in a relationship of trust with the God of Israel. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully something jumped out at you. There were a lot of cool things that stuck out at me as I was prepping and studying for this episode. If it was helpful and you'd like to express that, one of the ways you can do that, if you haven't already, is by subscribing to this channel. That's how we continue to put forward in-depth teaching like this, long-form teaching. We say all the time, this isn't TikTok. This isn't Instagram Reels. We don't, get to the point in 5 minutes. No, it's a slow burn. We are in a marathon, not a sprint. And guess what? We've got 125 more Psalms to go. So it's going to be a while. We're officially 1/6 of the way through the Psalms, I think, if my math is correct. But that's all we have time for today. Stay tuned for Psalm 26. And in the meantime, as always, keep training.